Word counts you probably are familiar with from if you read a Kindle, you can see word counts and what books you're reading, or you probably have to keep your documents that you send to your bosses below some word count. So you're all intimately familiar with word counts. Let's take a look at how word count can be used on RegData. So here online, go to RegData, beta.mercatus.org. Soon that'll be at regdata.org. And here you see the default graph that's loaded up is not showing us word count. We've got to switch from, in this box, we're switching from restrictions to word count. Can you see that at all back there? A little bit? All right, well, we've changed the graph to show us word count now. So you can see the graph at least. The graph on the x-axis is showing years from 1997 through 2012, and on the y-axis is the number of words. And this range is going from about 74 million to 100 and in 2012, 103 million words in the CFR. That's just the big, broad picture of regulation. Looks similar to the page count we saw earlier. We can go into specific departments. So here I chose this drop-down menu, and I'm selecting Department of Labor, and click the Apply button, and now we see the word count for Department of Labor by itself. And this starts off at about 2.96 million words in 1997. And you see a similar trend. It's growing not as fast as the overall trend, but it is growing over time. And finally, in 2012, there's 3.62 million words per Department of Labor. Let's pick one more department, one that's more interesting. Department of the Treasury. So you can also type into this box. You couldn't see it, but I just typed Treasury into that search box, and then it showed me the departments and agencies that have that word included in it. And then I selected Department of Treasury. So now this graph is showing you at the top Department of Treasury and the bottom Department of Labor word counts over time. Department of Treasury has more words than the Department of Labor because IRS is there. And then there's something interesting here. In 2002, there's actually a downward trend. About 500,000 words are cut away from the Department of Labor's text. We can actually try to figure out what happened there by looking further into the divisions inside Department of Treasury. So I just clicked the Start Over button there, switching again the measurement to word count, going up to the Regulators tab, typing Treasury, and now I'm going to go down and open up Department of Treasury, and you see these sub-offices. I selected TTB, Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau. I selected Secret Service. I selected Comptroller of the Currency, and I selected United States Customs Service. Now, those of you who pay attention to regulatory matters, you realize that Secret Service is no longer in Department of Treasury, and that you see the series ends right there. That's 2002. United States Customs Service, no longer in Treasury. The series ends in 2002, and that's 571,000 words. That's what happened. Those two offices were moved over to DHS. And so that downward, it was also TTB was split up. ATF, it used to be, right? And ATF was split up. They sent guns and bombs, maybe, over to Department of Justice and kept, no, guns and drugs went to Department of Justice and kept just the stuff they could tax in Department of Treasury. And so now TTB lost some words there and continued after that. One other interesting thing here that you can see by zooming in on a particular office, this is the Comptroller of the Currency, this blue line. In 2011, there were 208,000 words published by the Comptroller of the Currency. In 2012, 401,000 words. It doubled in 1 year. That's almost certainly the result of Dodd-Frank. So I can't prove that for certain. To actually know that, you'd have to go and read some of the regulatory text that they published in 2012. But most likely, that's the explanation for the doubling of the text for Comptroller of the Currency there. We'll start from scratch again, regdata.mercatus.org. And now there's two drop-downs here. This time we're selecting the industry drop-down. And I'm going to select manufacturing as the industry, and then click Apply. And then I'm going to go over here and select two different regulatory agencies so we can compare them. I select Department of Energy. And again, you can type into that box. And now I'm going to type Agriculture. I typed just AGRI, and it showed me Department of Agriculture, which I then selected. So now we've got two different agencies. Now I'm going to choose Industry Search Term Count from the measurement drop box. And so now we've got these two different agencies showing the Industry Search Term Count for the manufacturing industry. The top one here is Department of Agriculture. And running along here, the bubble shows you the number of times manufacturing was found, 1,435 times in the year 2012 in Department of Agriculture's regulations. Department of Energy, 210 in 1997. It's growing faster than Department of Agriculture's did. And by the year 2012, there are 536 manufacturing-related keywords, search terms, found in the Department of Energy's text. Now we can zoom in on more narrowly defined industries here. And so we go back up to this drop box. Again, it's the industry drop box. I clicked on the right of manufacturing, and it shows manufacturing's children. I clicked on food manufacturing now. So this is a specific child industry of manufacturing. And so now we're seeing food manufacturing regulated by Department of Energy. It's not mentioned very much. We have 50 times mentioned in 2012. On the other hand, food manufacturing related search terms are found a lot in the Department of Agriculture's text. Makes sense, right? So in the year 2012, there were 11,000 roughly industry search terms related to food manufacturing found in the Department of Agriculture's text. We can go further, go down to a 4-digit industry. So now I've unselected food manufacturing, and I'm going to select animal slaughtering and processing, which is pretty specific now. And you see there's only one line. That's because the Department of Energy doesn't mention these search terms at all, or not significant enough to warrant showing up on the graph. On the other hand, Department of Agriculture starts at 709, and then it's growing, and by the year 2012, we're at 1164. Animal slaughtering and processing related search terms. Now we can also zoom in within the Department of Energy. So you go back up, there's 2 drop boxes. Now we select the regulator's drop box. I said Department of Energy, I meant Department of Agriculture. Unselect Department of Energy. Open up Department of Agriculture, and now I'm going to select a couple of different agencies within Department of Agriculture that I happen to know are interesting to look at. One of them is Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. And then the other one, there's a lot of agencies in the Department of Agriculture, as you can see, so it takes a little scrolling up and down to understand what's in there. And I apologize if you can't read that. I know you can't. That's why I have to narrate it all. Food Safety and Inspection Service. And then I click Apply. Now we got 3 lines. The top line is Department of Agriculture overall, the entire department. The second line, the blue line, is the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. And that specific agency had about 800 of the mentions of animal slaughtering and processing. And then the other agency that we selected, the Food Safety and Inspection Service, had about 200 for the entire time period. So that's another way of using this. You can zoom in on specific agencies within specific departments. This is the index. Now, this basically is combining restrictions and the search terms together, creating an index, and then saying how did that index grow over time relative to what it was in 1997. So if you select up here in the metric growth of industry regulation, it'll show you growth relative to 1997. This isn't year-to-year growth, by the way, so it's clearly labeled on the y-axis, but if you go and use this and you see a percentage, here it says 37.03% growth in animal and slaughtering processing. That means growth since 1997, not since 2011. So that's the index that you can also look at. If you want to know how the index is made, I'm going to show you that, or we can talk about in the question and answer session here. But if you go to the website, so let me show you these real quickly on the website. Again, RegData beta.mercatus.org. The methodology tab is what I'm about to click here. The methodology tab will show you all the different metrics that RegData has available. And so here I've clicked on that, and we'll scroll down, and you'll see some equations. So that's where the industry regulation index is defined. You'll also see another one I didn't mention to you, industry relevance. That's another metric that we've created. It's basically the search term count divided by the word count for a unit of text. Now I've clicked on the research tab. Just all the different papers that have used it. This will be growing over time. So as more research is produced, or more charts and graphs, we're going to eventually put those up on the website too. And so you'll be able to check back or even follow on Twitter, which I'll show you soon, to keep updated on what's used RegData. And then you click on the data tab and you can download the whole beast yourself. All right, Supposing you had downloaded the data. Let me show you a cool usage. By the way, you can flip any graph over and it becomes a table. I just did that. Shall I rewind that so you can see that again? No, I don't know how to. So anyway, there's a button here where you can flip the chart over and it becomes a table, and you can download the table and you export it to a CSV file, which you can put into Excel really easily. So if you pick a few different agencies, like I did here, you can export it and put it into Google Docs. So this is, I selected about 20 different agencies and downloaded their data. I downloaded their restriction count and I downloaded their word count over time. And I put that into Google Docs. So you have, I'm just highlighting some of the agencies there, SEC and NHTSA. And the colors of these agencies correspond to the type of regulations they make. Dark blue are economic regulations. Green are Homeland Security. Light blue are environment and energy. On the y-axis here we have restrictions, and this is on a log scale, by the way. On the x-axis we have words. It's also on a log scale. And now you're seeing it grow over time. So as these move to the top right, these agencies are getting more restrictive. That was the birth of TSA. That bubble just popped up there. And by the way, the size of these bubbles corresponds to the budgets of these agencies. So a bigger bubble, bigger budget. Now we're moving forward again in time pretty soon here. OSHA's there, the orange one, EPA up in the corner. And now we'll hit play again. Now we're moving forward in time again. And you're going to see something fly in from the left here in a moment. There it is. Did you see it? We'll replay it. That's the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So that went from 0 in 2010 or 2011, and then in 2012 it shoots right up and likely will be continuing its trend toward the top right of that graph. So that's one thing you can do, combine budgets and restrictions, or budgets and words. And here's another way to look at all this. Now we're looking at bar graphs, and it's still log scale, so let me switch it off of log scale here. So now it's just the level. The level of restrictions for each of these different agencies. This one over here is EPA, and then there's a bunch of others. This is restriction growth over time by agency. So that's informative. There's other agencies here that weren't mentioned. We have MSHA on there, OSHA, a couple of different workplace ones. FCC is on there as the fourth most restrictive. It's not fourth most restrictive overall. It's just of the set of agencies I selected here. And this is just a sample. Since we have budget data, I created a restrictions per $1 million metric. And that's what this reordering just did. You saw those flip around. Now instead of just restrictions, this is ordered by restrictions per $1 million. And Pipelines and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration rises to the top of those that I selected. In fact, you see Coast Guard used to be over here. It moved way over to here, I think. And then the other Homeland Security related agencies are all the way over on the right because they're spending a lot of their budget doing things like inspecting people at airports rather than writing rules. And so it's just another metric, more information about the regulatory process when you can combine budgets, which budgets are allocated to agencies, with things like restrictions. Now you can also combine the data that you can download the data and do things like look at which industries are mentioned the most. Now this isn't necessarily the most regulated industries, although it may be, but you have to keep in mind, and when an industry is mentioned in regulation, it could be an exemption. It could be a carve-out. So it's not necessarily a restriction placed directly on the industry if it's mentioned, although odds are it is. And I do think that if not measuring most regulated, it probably is measuring most complicated. The more times an industry is mentioned in regulatory text, the more time lawyers have to spend poring over all this text to make sure they're in compliance, or that they can ignore it if it's a carve-out.